I am David Ito, Chief Instructor of the Aikido Center of Los Angeles, and with me is...
Bill D'Angelo, Aikido 4th Dan.
So, welcome to the month of March.
Almost.
Couple
days.
Couple days till March. This March will be Furuya Sensei's Meinichi, or 15th year memorial of his passing.
Wow, 15 years. It's incredible.
So it's interesting to kind of maybe talk about what makes someone a good teacher.
Sensei, what do you think makes a good teacher?
Ooh, such a good, hard question to answer. Like, what makes someone a good teacher? Is it tons of students?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Great successor, tons of cash. What does it mean to be a good teacher? Which is very difficult, kind of like, what makes something a good cake? Right? So if you think about like what I don't know, that's a very difficult question.
Well, the one thing that I know that, one of the things that I remember hearing, because I didn't start in this school. One of the things that was part of my trauma of being in this school is that I'm not an original student. But what I remember when I started here was my old teacher said, you need to come to this school because the teacher is so amazing. And what I remember hearing about martial arts was they said that the most important thing about martial arts wasn't even which martial art you studied, and you shouldn't pick what was closest to where you were. You needed to pick the best teacher. Now, he didn't say what the best teacher was or who the best teacher was, but the teacher I had at the time said, I'm going to take you to this school and I'm going to give you up as my student because Furuya Sensei is the best Aikido teacher that I know here in this area. And he dropped me off on the doorstep and left me here.
Thanks.
And yeah, exactly. It was great. But what I remember thinking about that was that it was not close for me. It was an hour drive. But I remember him saying to me that the most important thing in martial arts was to have the best teacher, not necessarily even the best art. So like maybe you might have to change martial arts. You might have to change the place where you go. But it was important to be with the best teacher. Now, that didn't answer your question, what the best teacher is. But at least what I kind of understand about martial arts is there's definitely for martial arts, there's something very, very important about having the right teacher. Maybe that's more important. It's not even the best, but the right teacher.
Well, it's hard because what does it mean to be the best, the right, the...
Well, we need to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
That's probably what we're trying to figure out. But all I know is that somehow landed me in this school. Someone telling me who I respected, who was a teacher, saying, this person has skill.
And you weren't a black belt yet, right?
I was a baby student.
That's really hard because, in the old days, when you asked a traditional teacher what their qualifications were, they would just say, kibishi, strict. I am strict. Mm-hmm. That was the only qualification a teacher would use in terms of how good of a teacher they were, because the student needs the teacher to be strict, not the teacher to be nice.
Right. And I think one thing that I noticed pretty quickly when I started at the Aikido Center of Los Angeles was there were a lot of really good high-ranking students. I did notice that.
Yeah, and it's very difficult when you think about what makes someone a good Aikido teacher. They talk about like this idea that it's like two arrows being shot across a river.
I remember this story.
And that they're to hit. And it's like the odds of them hitting are like...
very low.
Very, very low. And so, but that's like that thing where the teacher and the student are supposed to hit and connect. And it takes a long time for the student to connect with the teacher. And the funny thing is that like a teacher, the sad thing about being a teacher is that the teacher never gets to choose their students.
Right.
The student has to choose the teacher. And then the teacher also doesn't get to dictate how long the student stays with him or her.
Right.
So it's kind of a very sad thing, whereas you, as a teacher, you're at the will of the student. And so in the old days, you would only have like 4 students throughout your whole life. They came in as children, they stayed, and then you died, and all you had was like 4 to 5 students.
Well, maybe we could back and get some perspective, because I think that you and I both have, I mean, you have a much more experienced Aikido teacher than me, but I mean, I've taught in universities and I've taught a little bit of Aikido, but I know that you have a lot of ideas about what it means to be a teacher in general.
Yeah.
But maybe one thing that we could tease out about what it means to be a teacher is there's definitely people, not even at this table, that would say to be a really great Aikido teacher, you have to be a great Aikidoist. And some people would say you don't necessarily have to be a great Aikidoist. And the same thing in other teaching, like whether you're teaching French or whatever it is, or let's just say you're a track coach. Let's just make it very bland. Like, you don't have to be the fastest 100-yard dasher to be a great 100-yard dash coach. Like, obviously, like Usain Bolt has a coach, and that coach can't beat Usain Bolt.
In the martial arts, it's not the same way. Like like you said, you can have a bad. You could have been a track, not star, but you could have been a person who did track and field, and then been mediocre at it, but then go on to be a great coach. But in the martial arts, it's not like that. Mm-hmm. Because
explain that.
You can only recreate what you are. Mm. So if you're not a very good Aikidoist or martial arts teacher, you're not going to make a very good martial artist. However, I have seen bad teachers with good students and good teachers with bad students.
So let's play that out a little bit. So what does it look like when you have a teacher that's not that great who has really good students? What do you think the dynamic is that's going on there?
I don't really know. I don't know if they're buddy and that they feel like the teacher is a father figure or mother figure, or if the student themselves are very good. I'm not really sure. Like we used to go to this dojo overseas where the teacher wasn't very good at all, mm-hmm. but the students were very disciplined, more disciplined than they are at this dojo. And I was like, wow, look at that. But then you watch the teacher do Aikido, and you're like, that person's like barely first degree black belt, even though they're higher ranked than that, right? So that's the hard part. Does having hundreds, thousands, tons of dojos under your belt make you a good teacher?
Probably
necessarily.
Not. Yeah, not necessarily.
Does having made a really good successor make you a good teacher? Like one of the reasons why O-Sensei is called O-Sensei is not because he's a great Aikidoist, is that he was able to create all these great teachers.
Right.
Right? And the same thing with Second Doshu. He created all these really great Aikido teachers. So the thing is that honestly what it comes down, it's not about good or bad in terms of skill, but it comes down to luck.
What do you mean by luck?
If you're lucky enough to have a bunch of students that were disciplined and listened, that you're lucky. If you're lucky enough to have a really good successor or your children become Aikido teachers, you're lucky. But there are a lot of famous Aikido teachers that did not produce any good Aikido teachers to succeed them, and they didn't have big organizations, but they were good Aikidoists themselves.
But if we were kind of like looking at all the different qualities that an Aikido teacher or a martial arts teacher, it doesn't even have to be Aikido, but I mean, let's just say at the top, you would want them to be technically proficient, right? You want them to be very highly skilled, I would imagine.
Yeah.
First, you'd want them to be able to communicate.
Yeah.
Very well. You'd want them to be able to analyze students' technique and be able to correct. Mm-hmm. So they had to be observant, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Correct. Then they would need to be, I would think, at the highest level, emotionally perceptive.
Yeah.
Because students are like, in a way, like children, because you're taking them and making them grow, and so they're not just technically proficient. They have moods and cycles and all these different things. So the teacher's got to be kind of like a parent, in a sense.
Yeah.
So you got all these different qualities that the teacher has. Some teachers will have a little bit more, a little bit less of those things. And then it seems to me like the last piece, and when I think about like Furuya Sensei, like, both of us were his student, is that you have to, there's an element of inspiration that a great teacher of anything, doesn't have to be martial arts, has to have like this like little extra.
They give you an idea that changes you.
Yeah. So I mean, I think like that last piece, at least for me, like the really great teachers. I mean, I like think about like teachers I had in college or other places, or even for instance, like there's this element of like they bring the wow, like they bring some wow component to what they teach, so that they make you want to be better than you are.
Yeah, there's that motivation or inspiration that the teacher has to bring, right? So you have all those different elements that have to kind of come together, and then they come together, and you're lucky enough to have like a student, right? If I was talking to a friendly Aikido teacher the other day, and that person was saying that perhaps their children weren't going to become Aikido teachers, and so the teachers, after a certain point, the teacher's on the hunt for their successor. Most are, some aren't. Some are just like, hey man, this is a cult of personality. I don't want there to be a successor. But majority of a good teacher is searching for. So there's this idea that the warrior's death is to die
in battle.
To die, to be cut down in their prime on the field of battle.
Right.
The teacher's death is to die, to live long enough to ensure that there's going to be a generation next.
Right.
And so all the teacher is doing is honing their skills for the one. Right? This one person that's going to take everything over and pick up the baton and carry it to the next level. Right? And that's really, really like a very harsh, sad reality, because you're going to live your entire life developing yourself, winning and succeeding, and creating experience and wisdom to impart it all to one person.
So, if you take that as the the mission that the teacher has, I mean, if you look at what Furuya Sensei went through, well, I mean, that ended up being you.
Yeah, and the whole time I did not know it was going to be me.
Right, didn't know it was going to be you.
I thought just Furuya Sensei was cruel, and I felt like the students were mean to me.
Yeah. But, I mean, it ended up being you, but in the middle of that, Furuya Sensei ended up teaching hundreds of people.
Yeah, if not thousands.
I mean, he had a worldwide reputation.
Right.
So, and he taught both in person, and he was on the listserv, and he had a worldwide following.
Yeah.
So, and even more now, I mean, since the pandemic, I mean, we have in our dojo now, we have a lot of social media, we have a lot of different methods where you teach. What do you, I mean, I know that you've got this goal where you've got to think about finding the person that will carry on the generation of the dojo, but like, what do you do to like hone your skills as a teacher, the way you see yourself as a teacher? If we can talk about it that way, kind of shifting gears for a second, like how do you see yourself developing as a teacher, and what are the techniques like that we might be able to talk about that could help younger teachers? Like you've been a teacher now for a long time. We've been, as you said, it's been 15 years since Furuya Sensei passed away. So it's right. You've been running the dojo for quite a while now, but there's teachers out there that are younger, that are just getting their start. That's the thing.
It's like it's very hard to tell people to be like me, right? Because like, I mean, I've been the teacher for 15 years. I was a personal trainer for almost 20 years. My bachelor's degree is in teaching, right? And so I have a whole lot of teaching experience. But it's hard to tell people to be like me, because there's so many times when you go, I just want to give up, because the way is too hard, that you have to think, okay, today I can't say what I want to say. I can't get mad. Like today I kind of got mad on the mat and, chastise you all about the martial arts being contrived.
Right.
Right. I didn't get mad, but I mean, I raised my voice, right? But like the whole thing is that like you're each person has their own path or journey of development. And as they develop themselves, things come and go. People come and go. Some lessons you got to learn the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
You did something and your best student left. Ouch. And then you go, wow, like, okay. And then you have to introspect. Well, I did that thing. I acted this way. I said this thing. Do I want to be this way? Why am I doing this? Oh, Furry Sensei used to do that. You know, so like for instance, one time Furry Sensei was teaching Joe. And, you know, I'm okay at Joe. And so we're doing ski and all this stuff. And he's yelling at this student to make sure that the pinky finger covers the end of the Joe. Okay. Halfway on, halfway off. And the person couldn't get it. So the person's in front of me. He looks back at me and I just go like, I tilt the Joe forward and show him. And then Sensei goes, you want him to teach the class? Throws the Joe down and walks out. And then we're just sitting there. And then he goes, fine, let him teach the class. So we're sitting in Seiza for a little while. Sensei's not coming back. And I go, okay, I guess I better teach this class. So I get up. All right, everybody, this is how you do it. He comes out of, who do you think you are teaching this class? Hamon. Hamon means to be kicked out, expelled. Hamon. And I was just like, I didn't. Yeah. And so he kicked me and that guy out for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. But that's that thing. You know, if you're, I can't copy that. You know, if I walk out on the students, all right, you know, Bill, you teach the class. And I walk out on the students. They're like, what's this dude's problem?
Right.
You know, and so some things you can recreate what the teacher did, but some things you can't.
Or maybe you wouldn't want to.
Right. Like we talked about in the last podcast, do you want to slap people? Right. And I think it was a very eye-opening moment when I asked you, do you want to slap somebody?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, no, I don't want to do that.
Right.
You know, like that. And that's the part, like, I don't really know. Like, I don't know if I'm much nicer to the students today than Furry Sensei was. You know, like in the old days, like you're not supposed to give personalized gifts to the teacher. And one time, this one guy hand-carved these koi cufflinks for Sensei and gave it to him. Sensei's like, what's this? And then he opens it up and he goes, oh, I can't accept this. And the guy was like crestfallen. I'm like, what? He was crushed. And Sensei's like, yeah, we don't, I can't accept a personal gift and I don't wear cufflinks. I'm not a Westerner, all these things. And the guy was crushed.
Yeah.
If someone did that to me and gave me it, I'd be like, thank you. Okay. Yeah. And then I just put it away and I just, you know, because I would feel too bad crushing that person for giving me a personalized gift.
Yeah.
You know, and so some of these things you can do, some of these things you can't do. So, you know, being strict on the students is good for them. But I don't know where that level is. Because you push someone for their own benefit. If they were going to change, they would have already changed. So when you're pushing them, you're obviously going to push them to a place which is uncomfortable for them. And then that's where calamity ensues, where that person was like, you slapped me, you pushed me, you made me do this thing that I didn't want to do. And so I don't know how to do that for the students today.
When you say you don't know how to do it, you mean it's just that the politics with a small p have changed in martial arts today, and so boundaries are different. People are
me as in my own heart. Like I would just like to discuss it with you and have you not do this or do this to improve yourself
instead of just like going whack.
Yeah, whack or you know. But there are so many things that, given the choice, I would not have done, but that Furry Sensei made me do, which enabled me to become the person that I am today. So here's an interesting story. Like, Furry Sensei used to make me do like we'd have a party and I'd have to he'd say, you're giving a speech. And I'd be like, what? And I'm a huge introvert, right? And so I was like, oh, what? And then, you know, we'd have the Christmas party and he'd say, you're running the gift exchange. So I'd have to be up there talking. So the point of the story is that I had to take the Myers-Briggs personality test. And when it came out, the lady goes, oh, you're like this, like this. And I went, oh, I answered that with my external personality. And then I retook it and it was a little bit different. So I learned to become an ambivert because Furuya Sensei made me do demonstrations, MC demonstrations, give speeches at parties, run all these things where I had to stand up and talk in front of a group of people. So if he would have given me the choice, would you like to? I would have been like, no.
Yeah.
But he's like, you got to go do it.
So is that like Furuya Sensei doing that? Is that like go back to the things we were talking about where he was perceptive about your particular needs and he's like, yeah, David is gonna like, you don't want to talk, but as a development as a student and like in this dojo, like everything about you is fair game. Whereas in some other dojos, the only thing about you is fair game is your Nikkyo.
Yeah.
But in this dojo, no. Like if your hair color is fair game, the car you drive is fair game, the woman you date's fair game.
Everything's fair game.
No, every single thing's fair game. And not only that, he's going to find the thing you're most sensitive of and jam a knife in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they say the best teacher is the one that's the most unreasonable.
Yeah.
And so that's the hard part. Like I don't know how to do that to people because I feel so heartless when I do it. And that Furuya Sensei made me do all these things. So before I was much more of more chicken. And so if he would have said, go up in front of the classroom and say this thing, nope. Teach a class, nope. Demonstrate, nope. If he'd given the opportunity, I would say no. But then like Sensei would say stuff like, hey, what are you doing on Saturday? Nothing. Oh, well, you're going to come out, help out with the demonstration.
Right.
And you're going to give flyers out. So this is how I want you give out flyers. Go up to people and say, oh, would you like a flyer for Aikido? Look them in the eye, hand it to them. I'm like, hi. And then you do it.
Do you think like for yourself, and maybe we can talk about this for other teachers, like what would make a really good teacher, that what you're saying is maybe it's hard to find that boundary now, but there probably needs to be some way to reach that at some level, because when people come into a dojo, they're not just training their Nikkyo. They're
we don't know that, right? And so like it's just such an interesting thing when you think about like what makes a good teacher? Well, they should be technically oriented or proficient. They should have some type of mental proficiency. They should have some teaching ability proficiency. They should have experience. They should have a good lineage. You know, what other things do you think a person should have, right? It's really hard. And then they all have to mesh in that moment, because what I say to you, you just go, whatever, you know, water off a duck's back. Another person goes, oh, I can't believe this. You crushed me.
You just mentioned something really interesting, which I think some people that might be, you know, early in their Aikido career may not really understand. You could take a minute to explain it, because I know Furuya Sensei used to talk about it. What is lineage for an Aikido teacher? And how do we measure lineage here in this school?
Well, lineage is your teacher learned from a certain person who learned from a certain person who learned from a certain person.
So what's your lineage right now?
My lineage is I learned from Furuya Sensei. Furuya Sensei was a student of Second Doshu, and Second Doshu obviously was a student of O-Sensei's.
Okay.
Right? So you can trace yourself back with as few steps as possible to O-Sensei.
And that's, in traditional Aikido, that is extremely important.
Right, yeah.
So if someone's a new student coming into our dojo and they're like, what's lineage? They can read that on our website, or they can talk to a senior student. Senior student should be able to explain that.
Right. We are, quote unquote, Mago Deshi, grand students of O-Sensei's. Some people, they don't have that lineage that closely to O-Sensei. They're 10 steps away, 20 steps away, no steps, you know, they don't have any steps, right? Lineage is important, but it's not the only thing.
Right.
Right? It just means that you're trying to get it as close to the source as you can. You know, I studied kinesiology and physical education, so I have an idea of how to teach people stuff.
Right.
Right? You know, I have a certain level of technical ability. I'm fifth dan, so I have a certain level of technical ability. I studied under Furuya Sensei for 17 years and one day. That one day is the day he died, right? He died the day after I celebrated my 17th year in Aikido, right? So you can have that lineage, but you're trying to get as close to the source as possible. But I'm not 100% sure that is the biggest.
Right.
That's the big thing. Like for instance, in traditional Chinese medicine, after the Communist Revolution, a lot of the traditional Chinese medicine changed. But
in what way?
No, they took things out, added things in.
Oh, okay. And the content changed.
Yeah, the content changed. But the people who learned traditional Chinese medicine prior to that time, that went off to Korea, Japan, Vietnam, other places, their traditional Chinese medicine is a little bit more pure, perhaps, because it doesn't have that. They call it TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, but some people laugh and they call it traditional communist medicine, because it has that twinge
Right.
of where they took things out to make things easier, to make them for the people.
Okay.
Right. And so, like in the old days, they would just go up to famous practitioners and say, give me the secrets. And then you'd be like, here are the secrets, or die. And so today, when you think about a person learning Aikido, if the person's teacher or teacher's teacher didn't learn it from Aikido, how close to the source is it?
Right.
Right. If you learned it off Fuji Sensei has a 9 video series called The Art of Aikido.
Right.
And it's on Amazon. You can watch it on Amazon Prime, which is the craziest thing. The dojo doesn't get any royalties for that. But also, like, there are other people from other countries that say, oh, I watched that video to learn Aikido. I watched that video to learn how to teach.
Right.
So Lineage is is it really important? I'm not really sure, especially in this video, internet, YouTube day and age. But later on, if you think about, like, okay, technical ability. So if you didn't study teaching in a college, at the college level, how are you a good teacher? I guess you can still be a good teacher.
Right.
Right. If you're not a very good Aikidoist, if I'm not a very good Aikidoist, then my eye is not developed in an Aikido way.
How do you transmit it?
So how do you look at things and go, Bill, your foot is in the wrong position, when I am not very good at it anyways, right? So it's a very difficult thing. Track and field, they're timing you, they're looking at your step, they're photographing it with a high-speed camera, breaking it down. Oh, you're dropping your foot 1/10 of a degree here, and then they do something. That's sports performance, right? But this is something where you're trying to fix a problem with like 100 students in a room. And then you're trying to teach them, what is the essence of this technique? Every technique has several different mechanisms which could make it work, depending on your level, body size, rank, and all these different things. So you have to be aware of all of them. So when I go up to a guy who's 6'8" and having trouble with the technique, and I'm 5'4.5", and I go, this is what you're doing wrong, and this is how you fix it.
So, yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because it means at that level to be able to teach, you have to have a very sophisticated understanding of the biomechanics of Aikido technique.
So, it may not be that is the trait which makes you a quote unquote good Aikido teacher. So if we go to the next one, mental proficiency, that's even harder.
Yeah.
Right? Because anyone who says they're enlightened probably isn't.
Yeah.
And so you're watching this person and they go, oh, I just like to get drunk. Does that make them a good Aikido teacher? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. Right? If that's their focus. I was having dinner with a famous Aikido teacher, and he said something to the effect like, all I ever taught you how to do, not me, telling the other students,
right?
Because the students were praising him, and he said, the only thing I ever taught you was how to drink. And I was all,
strange.
And maybe he was being
a little bit
funny or self-deprecating or whatever it is, but they were being serious, and he was being whatever you would call that. And then, is that person a good teacher, right? So really, it comes down to, like, if you could live the way, right? The way is physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's spiritual. It's all those things that you're going to try to impart. It's very difficult. So really what you're trying to do is develop a template within the student that they know to follow these certain right and wrong things as they learn to develop themselves and figure out who they are. So you say the template is certain techniques, certain times, certain things. You do those things. Certain ways to think, right? Because what is the goal of graduate school? Do you know what the goal of graduate school is? As a lawyer, what was the goal of going to law school? What does it teach you?
Well, I mean, when you go to law school, what they tell you is pretty clearly, they tell you that going to law school is to teach you how to think like a lawyer.
Exactly. So when you go to graduate school for Aikido or law or anything, they're teaching you how to think like an Aikido teacher,
Yeah.
right? So that you look at things, you go, oh, it's like this. I talked about the hardest transition was transitioning from being a warrior
To a teacher.
warrior's mindset to being a teacher's mindset, right? Where I destroy everything in my path. Now I have to try to preserve everything in my path.
Yeah.
And so, you're trying to teach them how to think. So that's that template, right? That you give them this idea. So like if you think, well, everything has to be samurai. Samurai, samurai, samurai. Oh, Aikido, samurai, samurai. Oh, Japanese culture, samurai, samurai. The other day someone sent me this book. I can't remember what it's called. But basically the author asserts that a lot of what we think of as samurai traits and characteristics aren't, that they're kind of romanticized. And the student sent it to me and goes, what do you think? He said, this is going to blow your mind.
Was it written by a Japanese author?
No, it's written by a Caucasian guy who studied in Japan. And he's like, this is going to totally mess you up in the head. And I go, no, it's not. He goes, it's not? I go, what, do you think I don't know that already? Yeah, what do you think that, who do you think cooked the food back in the days? Was it just samurais and geishas? Nobody cooked the food? No, they got people that cook food, make weapons, breed horses. Not everybody's a samurai back in those days, right? And we think people as being very samurai-like or virtuous and all those things. That's also romanticized. So you can't really go with this idea of only going about it based on what someone says.
Yeah.
So that's why they have to give you this template that you internalize, and then you kind of lay it over things and you go, okay, that's how I developed that. Oh, the philosophy of Aikido is nonviolence. So then what does nonviolence mean for me? I mean, I could just say the stuff that Furuya Sensei said, but then I'm not speaking from the heart.
Yeah.
And then I don't really know what that is. And so as you develop yourself mentally and emotionally, you learn how to become proficient.
So you say like the change for you is going from the fighter to the teacher. We've talked about all the different qualities that a teacher has. What has been the single biggest mental shift for you in terms of like how your brain works on a priority basis, going from the fighter to the teacher? What's the thing that you had to internally like work against the most, that you were like, oh, the old David, the new David? Like, what is the can't do that?
Care.
In what way?
When I was a student and had this warrior's mindset, I didn't care.
Care about anything?
No, I just beat up whoever was in front of me. Roughed up every person, didn't matter, said whatever was on my mind, acted like a jerk, was willful, did all these different things. But today, as a teacher, I have to be more reserved. I have to care about the people that are coming to the class. But back in the day, I did not care. I did not care at all. Like, if a person came to watch Aikido, like two people, and then they were talking while Sensei was teaching, I would get up and be like, do you have a question? Because you're talking, so you obviously have a question. So what's your question? I'll answer it for you. Oh, I don't have a question. Well, then you should stop talking. It's very disrespectful. And then they're like, yikes, right? But because I didn't care. That's bad for quote unquote business, right? That's bad for business. And so today I have to go like, oh, they're talking. And I have to look and go, we should give these people some latitude because they don't understand traditional training and rules. And so no need to go over there and bite their head off. But in the old days, I'd be like, why are you guys talking?
Right.
And get
so if that's like the piece that the fighter has to like grind against, is that the fundamental component of being a teacher is compassion and care for the student?
I don't really know.
No.
They call the idea that you have the plum blossom and the plum blossom flower. The seed or nut of the plum blossom is very hard. Focusing on that and war, the hard things, makes you too rough. Focusing on the flower makes you too weak and soft. So you have to be this weird blend, right?
Yeah.
But it's really hard to be that way, especially in today's modern world where some things you say, they need to hear it. And then they needed to hear it, but then they quit. And you have to just be like, that's conviction. I say those things because they need to be said. and it's for their own good that I do this to you, say this to you, beat you up. I have to kick your butt because you're arrogant, and it would only help you in the other parts of your life. But it only helps you if you stay.
Right.
If I beat you up and you leave, it doesn't
work.
help you.
So as you were talking about the plum and the plum blossom, the plum seed, one of the things that was coming to my mind is, we're talking about changing from the fighter to the teacher, but you're the chief instructor. You're the dojo cho. You run the entire school. You have other people that teach some of the additional classes. So not only are you the teacher, chief instructor, but you have to manage instruction. How do you do that?
And that's very difficult because some people will follow exactly what I do and what I say, and that's great because that's good for my ego. Other people just do whatever they want. You say, hey, please don't talk so much. Please don't do this too much. Please don't beat up the people too much. Hey, please don't, please don't. So that becomes very difficult because, like, again, if you're not the teacher, there's a tendency not to care.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because you don't have to care. You don't care if it's hard for us to make rent.
Oh, because I see what you're saying, because you're not the manager.
Yeah, well, I just beat that person off and they left. That guy's a wimp.
Right.
You don't have to think about, the dojo's not going to be able to make rent this month. Well, so, like one of the things that a teacher does is something what Furuya Sensei called secret work. Secret work is all those things that a person does that you'll never see. So, like, lately I've been watching these Japanese restaurant videos.
Yeah, you told me about
where
this.
they spend the day with a Japanese soba or ramen guy.
Yeah.
They wake up with them. He goes to the restaurant and they have to go to the market with this guy, and then they go through all the prep, and it dawned on me, wow, so much goes into bringing you this product that you'll never know. Someone cut the pickles.
Right.
The pickled radish to put them in the dish so that you could just go throw them on the ground if you don't want them. Someone, like this one guy, he said, I only use ionized water. And then they're like, why not? Because it tastes good, it tastes better. I only do this thing. How much does that ionizing water thing cost? Which he has to do, and then he's selling a bowl of noodles for like $8.
Yeah. It's not a $100 dinner.
Yeah, and then they showed like them all the little things that they were making. Like he like boiled all the eggs for a ramen, right? And then he has to let them cool, and he has to manage his time so they cook, and then he puts them in the ice bath to cool them off, and then he has like this thing that cuts them in half, so that when you cut it, it doesn't it stays formed. And
How did they get the shells off? I mean, it's totally random, but
he didn't show that part. They just came out.
I would really like to know. It's totally random, but
yeah, but like perfectly. And so when he cut the eggs every time, he put them back together every time.
Oh,
and then, but I mean, all these little things details, that's what Furuya Sensei would call secret work that you don't see, And so, like Furuya Sensei did everything by himself. He did the newsletter. He wrote the newsletter. He edited it. He printed it. He postaged it. He put the labels on. He did all these things. And then maybe, if he was lucky, he got some student to drop it off at the post office.
Yeah.
But he did the whole thing by himself. Everything the teacher has to do is secret work because you only see the 1 hour, the 60 minutes that the teacher teaches the class.
Right.
But all those things that
make the dojo work,
make the teaching work, make the classes, create that space for you, that's the secret work. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes the teacher good.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, you're a professional teacher. Not all teachers are professional.
Right. I'm a professional Aikido teacher in title only. I do not get paid to do these things that I do. So all the things.
Well, what I mean by professionals is you're essentially almost a full-time Aikido teacher.
Right.
Yeah.
And all the things that I do, and have to do to make it happen, no, the students will never see.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is that if we're successful, no one will ever know the things that we do.
Right.
When we fail, everyone will point out why wasn't the radishes cut like this?
Right.
And what makes a teacher good is those things, I think. Because teaching on the mat for that 1 hour, how many hours does it take to become proficient in Aikido? 10,000 hours?
Right.
Right? How many people are going to actually put those 10,000 hours in? And mind you, is that 10,000 hours that, Malcolm Gladwell is talking about, are those 10,000 productive hours?
Right.
Or 10,000 total hours, even the ones that you came to class and just screwed around the whole time, so you weren't applying yourself? Does that hour count?
Right.
Right? And so teaching you those things, I don't know if the actual teaching of Aikido is what makes someone, quote unquote, a good teacher. What makes someone a good teacher is the care and concern that they put into the details that you will never see. It is so hard. Like when I have someone help me do the labels for our newsletter, and then almost every month, one will come back with no label on it. Postage, label,
no
return address, newsletter in the thing, but no label on it. And I just go, and then I talk to you guys and I go, hey, you guys got to be better. But inside I'm just like, what is the problem with that? And that I better just do it myself. But then if I do it myself, it's going to be late because
you can't do it all.
Yeah.
You can't do it all.
You have to stamp them, label them. Well, first you have to print everything out. Stamp them, label them, postage them, print the newsletter, fold the newsletter, stuff it, lick it, and then get it to the post office.
Yeah. It's impossible to do it all by yourself. It's not.
Well, it's possible because it happens every month. But like the point is that like you guys will never know. One time I said, hey, can you guys help me put the stamps on the newsletter? And then 3 students are like, sure. Get it? They bring it back to me. Some person put the stamps on upside down. And I was just like, what is, come on, you never put a stamp on an envelope before? But it goes out.
And it looks bad.
It looks bad. Do you think they go, oh, he must have had one of his absent-minded students put this on? No, the person goes, oh, Aikido Center Los Angeles? No good. Look, they can't even put the stamps on correctly. And then you go, oh, shame.
Yeah.
Right? So, that's it's the little things that the teacher brings. And sometimes it's the little things and the thing that they gave you, this little inspiration that they didn't even know possibly that they gave you, which created this spark, which changed everything. It went through you like a wildfire and it changed everything about you.
I do. I think this idea of secret work is a very interesting idea. I know today's session is not about honorarium or about Proficiency, but I think one of the things that was inspirational about Proficiency was he did seem to have this obsession about Japanese martial arts that made you want to know more.
Well, that's you. You were inspired in that way.
I'm sure there were many students that were like, okay, fine, the sword stuff, we can be done with it. But I think what I mean by that last little piece, and like every teacher has a different last little piece. They're not all the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying, like with him in particular, I think there, like I remember thinking that there was this. I mean, he was American. He wasn't Japanese, but
right.
There was a this desire to be very martial in a traditional way about him. But I mean, he ate McDonald's. I mean, he wasn't. I mean, I would buy McDonald's for him, and I'd be like, "Oh, how can you eat this?" But that was this dichotomy that he had too, right? I mean, none of us are perfect, but this thing with that, this incredible knowledge about the art of swords and all these things, it had a mystique. It did have and I think one of the things that people love and that you've continued the tradition here is that when people come to our dojo, you feel transported to a different place, and that enhances the training. But I do think that was an element, and I think that still exists under your training. It's a little bit different, but it's still similar in the sense that there's, it still remains traditional. People still come and they're like, I think that's one reason, because, you asked me to handle a lot of the stuff when people want to do commercials. People walk in the dojo and the first thing they're like, oh my God, like we want to film here. Like we don't let people film every time they want to, but we get everything from small commercials to movies. And I think that comes from part of the teaching is teachers, you've done it, for instance, they did it, creating this space where people want to learn.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, if all the books that we read, right, they teach us how to look at a certain thing that we didn't really know how to look at it, right? So if you read D.T. Suzuki's Zen and Japanese Culture, like, I read that so many times, and I was like, half the time I'm like, oh, it's so boring. And then one time I read the section on haiku, and it kind of resonated, and it made it sound so cool. Or like when Fu Sensei would talk about a certain thing, like you're like, blah, 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 sword.
Right.
And then he shows you something and you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then you become interested in that, right? So that's the same thing. Like the teacher gives you this idea.
Right.
And then that spreads through you like a wildfire. Yeah, and it resonates with you. And you go, oh, have you read this book? You read the books, you're just like, oh my God. And so there's that, it's that little thing that the teacher gives you. And it does, so you have to be technically proficient. You should be mentally and emotionally, spiritually proficient.
Yeah.
But really, it's the thing that the teacher gives you an idea, and that's why a bad teacher can create a good student. That the bad teacher is very bad at Aikido.
So is this the Wizard of Oz thing? Is that what this is in a sense?
It could be. But that when I went and I was like, wow. Some of these students, they weren't like the best proficient. They weren't proficient, but they were good, hungry students.
Yeah.
And disciplined. And this person was a jerk, and then you're like, wow. But that's that thing, right? Like a bad teacher can create a good student, but then a good teacher can create a bad student because they don't have the proficiency, they don't have the mental proficiency, they don't have the technical proficiency. Or, as Fu Sensei would say, if you're going to make a cake, you have to start with all the best ingredients. Some students can't be changed.
Yeah.
But that they can't be inspired. They can't want this thing. Like, one time I knew this student who was really into the art of Sun Tzu's Art of War. Really into it. He said, I have every book ever written on the subject.
Wow.
And I gave him a really rare copy that we had a double of. So I gave it to him for Christmas. Out of Fu Sensei's library. Really rare, rare Sun Tzu. And then one time I was talking to him, he's like, oh yeah, I got bed bugs. I burnt every book in my place. And I was like, that book that I gave you was like really rare and seems so, and I said, you should have just given it back to me. Oh, hell no. I had bed bugs, burned them all. I was all, okay. Seems weird to just, I would have just taken it back and, such a weird, but that's a thing, right? Like, some students can't be helped. And that's probably my biggest thing is like, I'm like rooting for every person. Oh man, if this person would just come back and with their head straight, that person could be excellent.
But isn't that sort of I've been formulating this question while I'm listening to you. I've got sort of two questions, but isn't that part of a really good teacher almost has to err on the side of losing, right? It's like you can't err on the side of winning, and what I mean by winning is not being willing to lose, because you've got to be willing to lose in order to be open to students. Yeah. Because students will fail. Right. That's the nature of being a student.
And that's what I was saying, that the sad thing about teachers is that they don't get to choose their students, and they don't get to decide how long the student stays. And so, therefore, the teacher has to, every moment, do their best, because you don't know how long they're going to be here. They're here for one class. They trained for 60 minutes and never came back. What happened to that person? And then it somehow, what you said changed them.
Yeah. I remember we were, when was the last time I saw you? I guess it was last weekend, but you were telling me this story of some young kids that were in the kids class. They were tall guys that they used Aikido.
Yeah.
And so you're just like, so you don't know whether what you teach someone is going to have any value.
Yeah, yeah. And then
10, 20 years later. So you can't even be attached to your teaching in a sense.
Nope.
And have any ego towards it. Because if you attach yourself to that ego, you may make a judgment about it that ends up being wrong.
Right, and so that's why a teacher is supposed to be trying to develop themselves in a spiritual sense so that what comes out of their mouth is not ego.
Right.
So like I had this patient the other day who was a student in our dojo probably 20 years ago.
Long time ago. Yeah.
And he goes, oh man, Watanabe Sensei, he used to say this one thing all the time. And every time I write a book, I try to write that into the book. And I was like, really? And then I asked Watanabe Sensei about it, and he's like, I don't remember saying that. But the guy's like, oh yeah, I weave that Watanabe-ism thing in to every book that I write. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And so you don't know
what's going to
connect. And so that's why you have to try to develop yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, really proficiently, so that when something does come out of your mouth, it's not ego-driven.
Right.
Right. I'm having a bad day, so I say, your left foot, your other left foot, you should just kill yourself. And then you do. And then I go, whoa, no, I didn't mean to like that. I was just being, I was having a bad day.
Bad way. Yeah.
Right. And so the higher you go, the more judgment is heaped upon you, because everything you do is out in the open. Right. So the teacher has to be careful, because that person might only be with them for 1 hour. And so you got 1 hour to create a difference. And so the more proficient you are, technically, that helps them. And the more proficient you are mentally, emotionally, spiritual is going to be the thing which changes them.
So this brings up a really interesting teaching technique, which I know you've talked to me and maybe Mike about, but I know you and I have talked about it, which I think is really interesting. Talk a little bit about, and I know this is technique, so if you're not comfortable going into it, let me know. But talk a little bit about the difference between talking too much and cueing, and how teaching like that kind of teaching technique, like in the Western way of thinking, like, I mean, I've been a teacher in a university, and so I'm used to like talking. And so I think people that are used to being in a Western teaching environment, they see explanation as being a better way of learning something.
Right.
Expository, blah, 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 and more blah, 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 blah. But when you and I have sat down and kind of talked about how to like teach something, you're like, no, like retract and pull away and like put in like maybe just a few comments here or there as a way to cue the student. Why does that work?
Well, the reason why is that, for one, I want you all to talk less. And then talking is different than cueing. Talking and pontificating and explaining has its place. But I want you to sit back and watch. You watch this person, you watch that person, and you think, that technique doesn't look right somehow. Because you're trying to develop your eye as a teacher.
Right.
So that you can say, you know what, this time, do it like this. And then it goes, psh, it blows their mind and it changes their whole technique.
Right.
But if you can't watch, right, this idea that you cannot entertain more than one thought in your conscious mind at any one given time. So if I stop you and tell you all these things,
it's too much.
It's too much. But if I'm talking and you're moving, if I'm talking and watching, I can't really watch. I can only talk, right? So I want you to explain less, because some of it you have to learn what's right and what's wrong first.
By seeing.
Right. And then you learn to articulate it. But then your cueing, which is, remember, cueing should only be 1 to 3 words.
Right.
Move forward, slide back. Because you want them to internalize that cue in their mind so that they could go twist, bow, squat, twist, bow, squat, twist, bow, as opposed to, the wrist should be at a roughly 45-degree thing of the hypotenuse of the 35-degree angle. And what you want to be thinking about is measuring your, like the person, all those words.
Too much.
Too much. They can't remember. So cueing is always 1 to 3 words. Slide forward, turn, step back.
So like when we were, I remember, when we were students, you're a couple years senior to me for sure, but I remember Fu Sensei didn't talk very much when he demonstrated.
No, rarely, if that, and he cued very well, and then every once in a while he would stop and explain.
Yeah.
But the thing is that's the reason why I say you have to learn it with your body,
right.
And you can only learn it with your body when you go into a subconscious state. Right? You're not driving in a conscious state. You're driving in a subconscious state. So that subconscious state is where you soak in the learning.
Right.
As opposed to a conscious state where you're like, what does he mean by that?
Right. So most of our time in a class, I tend to think this is true, but I'm just kind of want to get yours as chief instructor. Most of our time in the class, we need to be moving. Just whatever it is, you need to just be practicing, trying to do the best that you can, and then the teacher is going to be making targeted corrections.
Yeah.
To try to help the student.
Right. So there's all these ways you can think about learning. Some people think that after every 6 years you have a shift in consciousness, and so you have to create this momentum that culminates with this 6-year shift, and then when you shift, you automatically just have Kotegaeshi. You automatically just have Iriminage. But if you can't create that momentum by talking about it all the time, so it has to be physical. So you create this momentum, you're pushing it, and then when you have a shift, your body just remembers it.
Interesting.
Right? So that's this aniasism, right? That there's all these things the knowledge that exists inside of you is all the knowledge of the universe. So if all I'm doing is unlocking it. So you create this momentum in this subconscious state, which somehow breaks through and unlocks it.
And then you just have it.
And then like for me, someone said, "Oh, do you remember the moment where you got Iriminage?" No. Do you remember the moment where you got rolling? Nope, don't remember it.
It's interesting that you mentioned rolling, because I remember the single hardest technique I've ever remembered learning in Aikido was backward roll. And I remember learning forward roll and not really having too much trouble. But I remember the first couple days learning backward roll, and for whatever reason, I had a kinesthetic problem doing across my. I'm like, why am I? I never didn't do gymnastics when I was young, and it took me a couple days to do it. But then, like as soon as it happened, it was like I had never not been able to do it.
Yeah.
But before that, it was like walking over glass.
Yeah.
But as soon as it happened, it was like it was like automatic. It was such a strange experience. But it's exactly kind of like how you're describing it. It's like once you locked in the groove, it's like boom, it was there.
Yeah, and so the teacher's job is to create this momentum within your body and mind
to bring you over that
that
edge.
Pushes you over the edge, and then you're like, oh, how do I know? It's like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. I know Kung Fu, right? You go, I don't know how I know that. Like, I'll look at people's technique and go, oh, you need to change this, and this. And then one person asks me, how do you know that? And I go, I have no idea how I know that.
Yeah.
It's a feeling. I look at it and I go, that seems wrong, that seems wrong. And then, but it's part of your own development as a teacher, is to learn to see certain things. Oh, that person's not moving their hips right. Seems weird that something about their hips.
So because I remember reading a really interesting article that Akira Kurosawa wrote about when he was directing movies, that he said when he would direct a movie, like, and they were rehearsing a scene, he wouldn't look like directly at the action. Like, he would kind of look to the side and he would like almost like feel the movement. Is there, like, when you're watching a class, where do you like put your focus? Do you kind of just feel in like the movement around your peripheral vision, or do you actually like focus in?
I focus in, because I try. I don't talk that much in class, but I try to give every person at least one personal correction.
Okay.
So I watch them and I think, okay, it's good enough. I got to let them work on it. See, like there's times you got to let it simmer.
Okay.
So I look at people and I go, they need a simmering time. So I don't say anything.
Just let it go.
Just let it go. I look at the person and I go, look, this will push it into the pan.
Got it.
So I say, this is the thing you want to look for.
Got it.
Right. And then I see people that are just totally out of it. This is their first day and they don't know their left from right. They need you to be there to go, move your foot like this.
Right.
Move your foot like this. And then once you do that, you got to let them simmer. So you walk away. And then
just let them work on it.
Just because remember, this idea that all the knowledge is already contained within us. So
when do you go Rocky on someone and you're like, move your foot? You never do that, really.
I really don't do that.
Yeah.
I used to do that.
Yeah.
But I used to do that because it was my ego that wanted you to get it good. Because if you get good, then I'm a good teacher. Right? But today I realize it has very little to do with me. I create the space. Give you the opportunity. You're going to take it or you don't. Yeah. We have these intensive practices. One person shows up. I can't make you get better at it. You have to want that for yourself. So that's the thing is that going all crazy, yelling at someone, it probably is not going to work because they're just not there yet.
Right.
So you have to just wait and wait. And that's the thing as a teacher, I want you to be patient and wait and wait and look and wait and sit there and you go, oh, there's the moment.
Right.
Because remember, just like in the Aikido technique, timing is everything. Timing is a thing too.
Right.
So if I talk the whole time and all the other thing, am I going to catch your timing?
No.
No, I have to be there right at that right moment to go, excuse me, move your left foot forward and just walk away. And then boom, it changes that person's ability. All because you were at the right place at the right time, you gave the right correction.
Right. So we started going back to Saturday morning intensive. This is our second one since the pandemic after 2 years.
Yeah.
Which is a tradition that is now, what is there, 25 years?
Got to be over 25 years.
So 25 years. It's the last Saturday of the month, 6 in the morning, show up for cleanup, 6:30 class, 90 minutes. What's, from your perspective, maybe some dojos do it, some don't. What do you see as the teaching methodology behind a class like this?
Well, what I have been doing is I try to do, based on my training as a PE teacher, I try to stair-step everything. It's all about progressions.
Okay.
Right? So I try to take it from the most primitive, Aiki Jiu-Jitsu thing, show you how it evolved so that maybe you can get that thing. But I'm not sure if that's the right way either. Because sometimes we used to have our intensive seminar, which is the last Saturday of every month, used to be called Instructors Intensive.
Right.
And then
the teachers.
And then sometimes Sensei would just be in a bad mood, and for 90 minutes, all you did was fight it out for 90 minutes.
Right.
And you got a great workout. But the thing is, we also couldn't just go home after that. You have to go to breakfast.
And then 3 more classes.
And then you had to do 3 more classes. And there wasn't a person who dared leaving
home
before
the end.
Right. And if you did, everyone gave you that bad, hard look. And
it's true. I can attest to that.
So I'm not really sure. So I try to just go by what's on my mind at the moment. So last month I spent all this time on the ukemi for Ikkyo.
Right.
This month I've been really thinking about Nikkyo. Right. And so for the last week or two, I've just been working on that. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing next month.
Well, I guess my question, because I know the last one we did was Ikkyo, this one was Nikkyo. They've been very, very technical. But I mean, I guess the thrust of my question was, because no one else but our members have been at these things, as they're closed, is more how you see the intensive from a teaching methodology. What do you, what's the one, okay, let's break it down for a second. Let's back up. First of all, what's the purpose of coming in early? I mean, it may seem obvious, but a lot of people don't know. So I just want to ask you as the teacher, how do you see the methodology behind that? Well,
one of the reasons why that this asageko, the morning practice, is because O-sensei used to practice really early in the morning.
Okay.
And O-sensei said something to the fact that the energy of the universe or the earth is the strongest
in the morning.
In the morning. And so that's why he would wake up the uchideshis at 3 in the morning, but let's go train, and all this stuff. But that's one of the reasons why we have the 6:30, and then we've been doing it for 25 years
So it's
or
tradition.
more. I mean, I don't even. It's got to be close to somewhere between 25 and 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And so, but this idea that, so one of the reasons why I write a blog, and one of the reasons why I do intensive is because I like to talk too, and so one of the students suggested I write a blog so that I could get it out of my system, so I wouldn't do it in class. Then one of the students suggested that we start back with intensive after Furuya Sensei died because that same reason, right? But nowadays I still maybe like to talk, but I don't really want to.
Right.
Like we go places, I don't want to talk. I don't want to be the showcase. I would much rather just be happier with being the student.
Yeah, but intensive. And just looking at the last two classes, it's definitely an opportunity for you to explain the technical detail in ways that you don't do in a regular class.
True. And I don't know if that's good for the students or bad for the students.
Right.
I don't know. But the thing is that like some of it...
But you break it down.
I break it down, right? Like I said, I try to go from the most primitive to the most advanced. Like for Ikkyo Omote, I started out talking about it in an Aiki Jiu-Jitsu sense.
Right.
And then I always show you guys a little bit of like, this is what an Aiki Jiu-Jitsu person would do in this sense.
Right. The old style.
Old style pin, old style this way. I mean, I don't know, but the thing is my mind works that way. My mind creates progressions.
Right.
And so I just try to teach that way because I think it's logical. And then maybe that would help you all.
And
then
the way we teach and the way students learning it.
Yeah, because remember, you might go, I don't even know what we did today. But it's not about that. It's about creating that momentum for when you have that shift in consciousness, you go, oh yeah, that's how that thing works. And then you don't even use the same words that I use. You say it, you take it a little bit differently, right? But that's the hard part. Like if I'm talking a lot, most likely it's my ego that's talking.
Yeah.
Because if I'm one with the universe or whatever it is like that, it'll just be that one thing.
Yeah. Do you think that having that kind of traditional structure of having this class we've done for 25 years helps the students, the structure helps the students?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I really don't know. But all I do know is that I like things to be logical. So that's why I create a progression. I just like or just doing any old technique I feel like I'm doing. I try to have a theme so students know what to look forward to.
Yeah.
I always rehearse my intensive the class before.
Yeah.
So some people know that, so they come.
What's coming?
To see what I'm going to do. I mean, I could make it wild. I could do Street Fighter, Aikido, and all that stuff. But that's not going to. I don't think that's going to help you become a better Aikidoist.
Yeah.
That's what I said. What does it mean to be a good teacher? Is it the technical proficiency?
Well, I think one of the interesting things that, especially in the last two, I know you and I have had this discussion outside of class at, some of our like long ending dinners and lunches, is that there are certainly, before the pandemic, there were a lot of Aikido schools where people were very free with their Aikido. Really focusing on basics, I think is something that you've made an element of your teaching.
Well, it's because basics are the only thing that's going to save you.
Yeah, but I think that when people come to train at our school, I think a lot of times, I don't know that people actually say it this way, but I get the feeling sometimes people are like, it's very strong, but it's like vanilla and chocolate ice cream. Like, there's no chocolate sauce, there's no whipped cream.
But that's the way Furuya Sensei created it.
Yeah.
He said that second Doshu's Aikido is very vanilla, very, very basic. But then there's this power in vanilla and chocolate. There's this power in this basics. When you lose your way, you
go right to the basics.
Go back to the basics.
Yeah.
You don't go check some Hail Mary touchdown throw, right?
Yeah.
You got to go back to the basics. But that's the hard part. If you don't have strong basics, how can you go back to the basics?
Yeah. Because I think that's, and I don't even mean to cut you off, I'm sorry. All I was going to say is to give you an opportunity to say more, is that it seems that is part of like a teaching component in our school that was carried down from Furuya Sensei to you, which is this incredible emphasis on basics as
Yeah.
a teaching core.
Fancy techniques always usually fail,
Yeah.
right? Basic techniques always usually win. But like that's the hard part today, right? Like
They're not sexy.
they're not as sexy, so they're not as wild and they don't captivate you and all that type of stuff. But when you get into a pinch, those are the techniques that work, these basic techniques. You know, and as we, come to the end of this podcast, do we think about what does it mean to be a good teacher, right? Is it lots of students in dojos? Is it technical proficiency? Is it teaching proficiency? Is it mental, emotional, spiritual proficiency? It's a lot of all those things that come together. But really what holds together, which holds this concept, and this holds this concept, and this concept, and this concept together are the little things in between.
Yeah.
The teacher has to do all this stuff so that to provide you an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
And that those things will be totally unsung. You'll never know what that person had to do in order to give you the opportunity to study this art. So what makes someone a good teacher? I don't know. Luck is a huge component of it, and people hate it when I say that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been, I think, a really good hour. I think, we've got a week till Free Sensei's Memorial Seminar.
Yep.
We'll really look forward to some hard training. And it was great to have another podcast in the new year.
Totally. So thanks for listening or watching. If you have a comment or question, want us something to cover, please put it in the comments. And have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.